For a couple days now, you guys have been doing integer addition and subtraction problems, no longer using visual aids. You don't need the number line or color-coded dots to answer, for example, negative 16 plus 18. You can do this all just by following these kind of simple rules here. If you have a problem where both the numbers are the same sign, maybe both numbers are positive or both the numbers are negative. For example, if I had 2 plus 3, 2 and 3 are both positive, so same signs, you would add them together to get 5, and then you always keep the sign of the larger number. In this case, 3 is larger than 2, 3 is positive, so my final answer will be a positive 5. Another example of a same signs problem would be negative 2 plus negative 3. Okay, notice that both the 2 and the 3 have a negative sign in front of them. I could even rewrite this problem as negative 2 minus 3. Okay, these are the same problem. The bottom half is just written a little simpler. But since both the 3 and the 2 have negatives in front of them, this is considered a same signs problem. So we need to add. 3 plus 2 makes 5 in either of these cases. And then you keep the sign in front of the larger number. In this case, 3 is larger than 2, and 3 has a negative sign in front of it. Or in this bottom case here, again, 3 is larger than 2, and 3 has a negative sign in front of it. You might say, that's not a negative sign, that's a subtraction sign. Negative signs and subtraction signs are the same exact thing. That's why they look identical. So yes, this 3 does have a negative sign in front. So I need to keep the sign of the larger number, and my answer would be negative 5. If you have an opposite signs problem, you subtract and keep the sign of the larger number. An opposite signs problem may be negative 2 plus 3. In this case, the 2 is negative, but the 3 is positive. They are opposite signs, so you subtract. 3 minus 2 is 1. Keep the sign in front of the larger number. 3 is larger than 2, and 3 has a plus sign in front of it, so my answer would be a positive 1. All right, so we've been using those rules rather than having to draw out a number line to find our answers. Let's follow those rules in this first example problem. I've got a negative 24 plus a negative 36. If you want to, you're free to write this problem as negative 24 minus 36. Okay, that's optional. Now, is this a same signs problem or an opposite signs problem? The 36 and the 24 both have negatives in front of them. So this would be a same signs problem. And going back to the rule, whenever you have same signs, you need to add. So adding 24 to 36 gives me 60. Then I keep the sign in front of the larger number. In this case, 36 is larger than 24, and 36 has a negative in front of it. So my final answer would be a negative 60. Today on your homework, you're also going to see problems involving fractions and decimals, like these examples. 1/2 minus 3/4, and then example 2, negative 2.71 plus 3.5. Now don't be intimidated. We're going to use these same exact rules even though we're now dealing with fractions and decimals. Okay? So first of all, is this a same signs problem or an opposite signs problem? The 3/4 has a negative in front of it, but the 1/2 does not. So that must mean a half is a positive number and 3/4 is a negative number. This is an opposite signs problem. Okay, and remember, whenever you have opposite signs, you need to subtract. Now, in order to subtract these two, I'm going to need a common denominator. So let's rewrite 1/2 as 2/4. Multiply both the denominator and the numerator by 2, minus 3/4. Okay, now that we have a common denominator, we can subtract 2 minus 3 is a -1. And then the denominator stays the same all the way across. And my answer is -1/4. Opposite signs subtract. Okay, but you need a common denominator before you can subtract two fractions. And you always keep the sign in front of the larger fraction. Now, obviously, 3/4 is larger than 2/4, and 3/4 has a negative in front of it. So my final answer should be negative. Let's try the decimals problem. -2.71 plus 3.5. Is this an opposite signs problem or a same signs problem? Opposites. Because the 2.71 is negative and the 3.5 is positive. Going back to our rules, opposite signs subtract. So I need to subtract the larger number minus the smaller number. Keep in mind, whenever you are subtracting or adding decimals, you have to line up the decimal points. I can fill in this hole with a 0. Okay, now to subtract, I will borrow bring my decimal point straight down in a line, and I get 0.79. Now I always keep the sign in front of the larger number. In this case, 3.5 is larger than -2.71, and 3.5 has a plus sign in front of it. So my final answer should be a positive 0.79. Same signs add, opposite signs subtract.